Welcome to the virtual college fair. Thank you for joining us. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to sign up for additional sessions. And this presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at the same website where you registered. And now I'd love to turn it over to our presenters. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Anna. So three of us are from Whitman College. A couple of ground-keeping rules. We are going to actually start with a quick presentation, and then we will shift to a more Q&A focused part of the session towards the end. So we're glad to see you all coming into the attendee box, and please feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go. I'll be monitoring them, and we will certainly get to them by the end. But quickly, we want to introduce ourselves. My name is Henry. I am an admission officer here at Whitman. I actually grew up on the East Coast in northern New Jersey and moved out to Walla Walla a few years ago, and have carved out a nice little home. It is a beautiful small town area that is full of fun activities to do, and we will get into some of those things. But first, I'd like to have my colleague Louise introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Louise Carneas. I'm an assistant director of admission here at Whitman, where I've worked for 4 years. However, before that, I was a Whitman student. I graduated in 2016. I was an English major, and I didn't come from too far to go to Whitman, certainly not as far as Henry. I grew up in the Portland area. And I'm happy to speak to my experience as a student in addition to my role as an admission officer.
Hi, everybody. My name is Luke. I'm currently a senior studying at Whitman, working in the admission office. I'm studying environmental studies and economics, and I'm also an East Coaster from Vermont, from Sharon, Vermont. It's a small town in eastern Vermont.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. So I think it's really helpful for us as we start to think about Whitman and how it might separate itself from other small colleges, because we're in this virtual setting, to understand where are we located and how might we get here. We're lucky to be in the very southeast corner of Washington State in a town called Walla Walla. The town's so nice they named it twice. We're conveniently right on the border of Oregon, or just above it, about 3-4 hours away from some of the major cities like Seattle, Portland, Spokane throughout the Northwest. What's really convenient is there's a couple different ways of getting into Walla Walla these days. We do have an airport right in town that flies to Seattle back and forth. So you definitely will see some students fly to Seattle and get a connecting flight. And tons of students are always willing to help carpool students up to the airport, not to mention the free parking, always a nice perk. But there's also a lot of students who fly into an area called the Tri-Cities, about a 50-minute drive away. And that's a great option for students because it also is at the intersection of the highways coming across the state from Portland or Seattle. So plenty of Whitman students fly into the Tri-Cities airport and are easily able to carpool with their friends who drive from Portland and Seattle. And that way it isn't such a big, daunting endeavor to get out to Walla Walla, despite the distance from cities. And I think it's also important to understand how kids are spending their free time and what they have access to. We're super fortunate to have a downtown Walla Walla scene that has plenty to offer in terms of entertainment as well as beautiful geography. So these sites you see here are legitimately a 5 or 10 minute walk down the street from the center of campus, making it such a great opportunity for students at a small college like ours with only 1,500 students to get the best of both worlds. They build this great community in their on-campus clubs and groups, which we'll unpack a little bit later in this presentation, but they also can escape that small college bubble and find fun restaurants, live music, great events like the Farmers Market and County Fair. Walla Walla is really known for its community organized, very small town oriented events that help bring all the locals and students together in this one unified space. So for students to be able to easily transport back and forth on foot or on bike without even necessarily needing a car, that goes such a long way towards students helping feel like they've got a lot at their fingertips to do. But it's not just about the downtown Walla Walla scene as well. It's really also about the geography around us and how students are getting into the outdoors and taking advantage of an awesome climate that we have. We're so lucky to have 4 seasons that come into Walla Walla every year, but 4 seasons that don't get too extreme. So you may get 1 week in the winter where it gets below freezing, a week in the summer above hundreds, but that's generally about it. And because we're on the much drier side of the state, you don't quite get the gray rain that Portland and Seattle do. So kids and faculty and staff too love to be outside. There are so many beautiful days to be in downtown Walla Walla, or also in our backyard, like you can see in the bottom right corner. Those mountains are called the Blue Mountains of Oregon, just over the border. And you can easily get into those mountains to do some hiking, biking, backpacking, not to mention all the outdoor trips that will take you in the nearby area for rafting or kayaking or more serious mountain endeavors. We're so lucky to have all these outdoor spaces at our disposal. So I think for students to have that downtown fun, vibrant community, as well as a beautiful terrain within our backyard, goes a long way towards students feeling like they can take advantage of our area and feel very entertained without the need to escape to some major cities. So with that, we're actually going to transition into specifically thinking about a couple different programs at Whitman that really help to separate it from small colleges. Because if liberal arts colleges are something you're thinking about as a student, they can often blend together in their curriculum and their professional engagement opportunities. So I'm going to turn it off to my colleague Louise to highlight a few of the flagship programs that we have that help Whitman stand out.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Henry. My name again is Louise Carneas, and in addition to working at Whitman now, I had the distinction of going there as a student. I could not agree more with what Henry said, right? We share a lot of values with a lot of colleges, particularly the colleges that change lives. Part of the reason that we partner with this awesome group is because there are so many of our really important core values that we share. So we're in great company. You have so many options all over the country through CTCL schools that will have basically these three things listed: a really interdisciplinary curriculum, hands-on learning, and engaged community. So that's very important to Whitman. In brief, we are a small liberal arts college of about 1,500 students total. Henry's framed our location really nicely in a town of 34,000. We have 58 majors and minors to choose from, and all students come in undeclared. So for your first 2 years on Whitman's campus, and really all 4 years, you're able to take electives, explore so many different disciplines, maybe some of which you explored a bit in high school, but there's so many new classes and new opportunities on any college campus and on Whitman's campus. So the first thing I'm going to talk about in reference to our interdisciplinary curriculum is one of the programs that we're actually best known for nationally, our environmental studies program. It was the first of its kind. And it focuses on environmental studies as an overarching teaching philosophy rather than a single academic department or major. You can see all the areas that you can combine environmental studies with listed out here, and you actually have to combine it with something, right? This is too overarching of kind of a philosophy and a creed on Whitman's campus to fit into one single major. Environmental studies biology or environmental studies geology might be more suited to someone who's interested in the environmental sciences, but you can also get a really in-depth, nuanced experience in environmental studies politics, right? These aren't just issues affecting nature and affecting the non-human environment. I would say that on Whitman's campus, part of what we mean by interdisciplinary studies is always thinking of kind of current events, the world around us, and the way that what we're learning is applicable to human lives. So I would say environmental justice is maybe the core value that all departments on campus are hoping to implement through the environmental studies committee or through the environmental studies community. Also, it can really feel like the Walla Walla Valley is your classroom in this regard. You could go survey soils and drainage and focus on how wine grapes are growing and how that's affecting the ecosystem. Just 10 minutes from campus, you could look at runoff in the Walla Walla River, but you can also work on or focus on public health and access to healthcare for migrant workers in the area, right? The agricultural industry, which so influences our campus and our town, the farmers market that Henry mentioned, is also one that has a very human impact and a human aspect for migrant workers in the immigrant community. So we definitely see environmental studies as a dynamic issue and environmental studies or environmental justice, I would say, as a core value in addition to that, and a very interdisciplinary one, right? I've said this many times, but it doesn't quite fit into one department. There are many classes like that on Whitman's campus, a few of them listed off here. We have 3 informal divisions, the sciences, the social sciences, and the arts and humanities, but all 3 classes here really pretty cleanly straddle 2 different areas. You'll not only be taught by faculty with a breadth of knowledge that again spans across multiple divisions, multiple majors and fields, but you might also be in a class with students from all across the college, right? Classes aren't restricted to students within your major. So even if you are in, say, that political ecology class here, there might be an environmental studies geology major in that class. There might be a theater major in that class. There are many courses that don't have a clean kind of set of prerequisites, a clean not hierarchy, but clean building blocks to get into the class. And that's totally fine. All students have really high writing and speaking and analytical skills. And so you'll be able to bring a really cool perspective from your department into, say, like the literature of shipwrecks and piracy course that you decide to take your junior year. So that's a lot of fun as well. Additionally, students kind of take this philosophy off campus with them. These are some photos from our off-campus studies photo contest. Off-campus studies currently is not like a thriving program, right? As you may be aware, but Whitman students are always, I would say a lot of them are connecting really virtually with off-campus studies program, keeping global issues and travel in mind, even at this time when so few of us can travel. And on our campus, actually, there's an interest house community, many of which kind of represent multicultural and multinational interests. The Spanish interest house, the French interest house, the Japanese interest house, and the German interest house will have native speakers actually living in that building with students. You're encouraged to speak that language at mealtime. I think it's technically required, but everybody's there doing it for fun. And then also those houses like host events for the whole community. I think that Luke is going to speak to community a bit later, but one thing I think is so amazing about both like students like philosophy in the classroom and outside of the classroom is that they really want to share their passions and interests with one another. And I will talk a little bit more about off-campus studies, even though right now it's not a super active program. Students are able to use it kind of as an opportunity to not necessarily interrupt, but to switch gears within their Whitman education. Some students go on an off-campus studies program that's just like a lengthy field study. Others go on an off-campus studies program that's maybe more focused on an internship for the course of a semester, and you're doing work in the field or in an office for about 7 or 8 weeks. And then you have a quick intensive phase at the end, which is different than a typical academic schedule. So this is just one chance to learn in a more dynamic environment. There are also many opportunities to do this kind of work, taking a break, interrupting your typical class schedule on campus. The STEM Hub is a really great resource as well. Like I said, spaces where we kind of play with the traditional like classroom dynamic. The STEM Hub is a place to come with questions to prepare for exams in STEM fields. It's also designed with access in mind, so that Whitman students are there to support one another and create a more inclusive and diverse like STEM field. This happens in the computer science program as well. Janet Davis, who's the chair of that department, is a really big proponent of group programming and the potential that it shows in all industries in creating a more equitable and a more diverse environment in the working world and on campuses. And one kind of off-campus site here, which I like because it shows one of our famous sunsets, is the Whitman Observatory overlooking the Columbia River Gorge. So really dynamic classroom environment, many non-traditional classroom spaces on and off campus that Whitman students take advantage of. I also want to talk about another important type of learning that you'll do in college, that hands-on learning, and the way that Whitman is able to facilitate that. So through our Whitman internship grant, in brief, it's a $3,000 to $5,000 grant for unpaid internship, or it's not unpaid after the grant, but for any internship or volunteer opportunity that Whitman students gain over the summer. Essentially, it's a way for Whitman as a campus to make sure that you're able to do whatever it is you want to do over the summer, take advantage of every opportunity, and still be able to be generating an income, which is so important for the vast majority of students to do over the summer. It is really compatible with our work study program, but also it can help you get an internship abroad. For instance, that $5,000 internship is meant to help you totally relocate to a new city or a new country. And last summer, or the previous summer, 94% of applicants who applied for the internship grant actually received it. You'll also have a lot of help finding those internships through our Student Engagement Center. There are many opportunities on campus and in the community to have, even throughout the school year, a meaningful research project, a position in, say, the Whitman Consulting Corps, where you're working with a local nonprofit. The SOS Clinic, for instance, is this really cool nonprofit urgent care center for migrant workers and the underinsured. Walla Walla Public Schools, the Blue Mountain Land Trust. Whitman students are working there day in and day out, building up these professional experiences, working with our Student Engagement Center on like really a 4-year trajectory, right? Like you can sit down with a career advisor your absolute first year and think about how you want to enact your professional goals during the school year over the summer, and having that be really concurrent with your academic and social growth that you'll do on a college campus. So if you're nervous about your transition, transition from college to the real world, it's not going to feel like that much of a dichotomy by the time you actually get there, right? Throughout your time at Whitman, you'll feel like you're living in the community, not just on the campus, and that you'll definitely have a lot of professional mentorship relationships to take advantage of. Pre-health, pre-law, and pre-business, I always want to mention as well. Going to an undergraduate institution like Whitman, where we don't have graduate programs, I think that that actually puts you in an excellent position to go on to graduate programs, right? If you're at a large research university with an excellent graduate chemistry program, you're not going to be doing research in the biochemistry program as an undergraduate student. I think that's important to mention. All of our resources, professional research, are for you as an undergrad. And we have really high placement rates for all of these pre-professional tracks, pre-health, including like pre-pharmacy, pre-veterinarian, pre-medicine. That's probably our most popular field right now, but there's a pre-health society and a lot of student initiatives also to help prepare like one another for this next step forward. With that, I want to pass it on to an actual student, and then we'll come back to me to talk a bit about the application process. But Luke has some great community experiences that he has been wanting to share.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. So I think as I'm starting to reflect on my experience at Whitman, thinking about graduating here, community stands out as one of the most rewarding and fulfilling things that I've received on the Whitman campus. And I think to address that, I want to start first by just addressing a Whitman unique program called Semester in the West. This was a semester-long program that I was fortunate enough to do my sophomore year. It's comprised of 21 sophomores and juniors at Whitman, only Whitman students, and one Whitman professor. And we drove 10,000 miles around the West, visiting 10 states, talking to ranchers, writers, ecologists, politicians, and various other professionals in their field about whatever it is they do, generally environmental issues. And that's sort of the core topic of it. So it draws a lot of environmental studies students, but not exclusively from Whitman. And as you can imagine, living and traveling and cooking and sleeping all together as a group really fosters just an incredibly tight-knit community. It's an incredible way to then move on after the program and continue those strong bonds. So I think I can talk about community here through a variety of different sort of stratas or lenses. I think to start, there's the community that's formed amongst the students and with the professor, those of us who actually traveled and did this program, because naturally, camping every night, we had various cook crews. So we'd cook for each other, wake each other up at 4 a.m. to get to talking to somebody the next day. And that formed just beautiful, strong bonds between all of us. So that's, I think, the first layer that will all hold dearly to us as we move through life. Beyond that, there's the connection that we made with our professor. His name is Phil, and this program is just, he created it about 20 years ago, and it's just his absolute child. He loves it. He got Whitman to sign on, which is amazing because it really is a rare program to say, hey, Whitman, I want to take 21 people for a whole semester with me traveling the West. And they let him do it, and he's done an incredible job with it. So that connection that we've all established with the professor is just incredibly unique. He sees it as once he has students that participate, he will then help them out in whatever comes next, whether that's looking for jobs or internships or writing letters of recommendation or just being his friend. And he's a great person to be friends with. I think for a lot of us, when we got back, that looked like going to his house for dinner. That looked like going bowling with him because he's an avid bowler. Even though he schooled all of us, it was a lot of fun. So it's just an incredible way to form those bonds with a professor. And he's a very connected person, as you can imagine, someone who is tasked with finding about 70 people to meet with in the field. He's just connected, especially in the environmental studies world, but really just in multiple disciplines across the entire West and across the entire country. And that's a great thing to have. So that's sort of the second tier of how community is built from this program. And I think a lot of the core values that are taught and learned on this Semester in the West program are in a lot of ways just a boiled down microcosm of what I've also found at the Whitman level. So on a slightly larger level, which is 1,500 students instead of 21. But really a lot of it is similar because at Whitman we tackle things interdisciplinary, as Louise mentioned, and it's sort of I think the location, as Henry mentioned, also fosters that, because in that semester in the West was traveling, and that formed a strong bond. I think the fact that Walla Walla is a small, very homey area, I think that fosters our community in a similar type of way. We spend lots of time together because we're not in a city, so students don't go off and go to a bar or a club on the weekend or something, because that's we want to spend time with each other, and that's excellent. And I think that community gets built from the ground level in our first year, because first year students are sort of funneled into basically 3 residence halls, and there's so many materials and tools provided by the college to foster community at that level. And it's successful. It's very successful. I still, as a senior, if I'm talking about a Whitman student that I maybe know peripherally, and I'll call them like a Jewett person or an Anderson person. Those are the names of the residence halls, because that's such a strong way to form community, and that just sticks with people. And that's not to say you're stuck within that world, but it's an amazing way when you first arrive to Whitman. It's an amazing way to start feeling comfortable and start feeling like you're part of a group. And for me, that was really successful, because in each residence hall, there are little sections of about 15 students, and then it's broader of the whole building, which might be about 90. So again, there's several levels of community building that gets done. And maybe starting really small in those sections, or maybe even just starting with your roommate. You can then slowly build out as you're sort of exploring the scary college world, until you're comfortable feeling like Whitman is just a caring and comforting community, which it is. But I think it takes time to get to that point, and I think it's done really well to get to that point. And ultimately, what that looked like for me and for a lot of people is needing to leave 15 minutes before class, because I know that when I walk across Ankeny, our main quad, I'm going to run into 5 people that I know and want to talk to. So that's just sort of how it looks on a small, vibrant community like we have. So yes, I would say, obviously there are many reasons to attend Whitman, but I think community is a principal one, and because it's just so strong, and it's been wonderful for me here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Luke. Everybody in the audience and our small roundtable audience, please do ask questions, and we'll break out in just a minute for some Q&A. First, I want to get some housekeeping items about applying to Whitman out of the way. Listed here are deadlines for our 3 rounds. We have early decision, a couple different deadlines for that, and regular decision. Whitman is not on a rolling admission basis, so whether you applied yesterday or on January 15th at 6 p.m., but don't do that to yourself. You'll still be considered in the same light for both admission and financial aid. So just some dates to keep in mind. Don't worry, you've got plenty of time to start your Whitman application. We are on the common application. You're probably familiar by now with the various components to that. It's designed to make your life easier because you can submit it to so many colleges. It might not at this point feel like it's making your life easier. And again, if you have started, I won't give too much, retroactive advice, but I hope that you've been staying balanced and not selling yourself short in the common application. So if you're still working on it, if you're looking at your activities section, don't feel too overwhelmed by the fact that this past 6-month stretch, you haven't been able to do everything that you have wanted to do, right? Helping out around your household, taking care of younger siblings or older members of your household, having a job of any kind, virtual or in real life, right? That is still an activity, a source of involvement, and we do want to hear about that. For the purpose of some workshops that we've been doing recently, we've been breaking the application down into components that things that you say about yourself, right? The common application as you're filling out, but then also what others are saying about you. Your letters of recommendation from teachers and counselors are also really important. So there's kind of those 2 aspects, right? You get to sell yourself, but you should also know that the teachers that you chose, we really do care how you come across in the classroom, right? The kind of work that you've done, even if you're the class that you took or the teacher who wrote your letter of recommendation, even if that was a big challenge for you, those are sometimes like some of the best letters that we read. So don't feel nervous about your transcript or your grades or feeling like things academically didn't totally go as you planned, right? Especially with all the crazy factors influencing these last few months. We really do want to get a well-rounded and holistic idea of who you are. And when it comes to looking at your transcript, we're always doing that in context, right? You'll have opportunities on the Common Application, again, to share things about yourself, your faculty or not professors, I always want to say that, teachers at your high school will get to talk about you, but remember that your admission officer is also like a third and really important advocate for you, and we will know what it is that your high school has done, maybe to adapt to COVID. We'll also just know from the baseline how many AP or IB courses, if any, your school offers, what the options for a challenge are. So Henry and I both have territories, all of our admission officers do, and if we run across a high school or a curriculum that we're not familiar with, it is our job to figure out how that might be reflected in your transcript. When it comes to financial aid, you will automatically be considered for merit scholarships with your application. But for need-based financial aid, you must fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile, which should probably be like the only two items on this entire slide. Those are important, and the CSS profile isn't required by all colleges. It's specifically private colleges that tend to require it. So don't forget, it is really important in being considered for need-based financial aid. We take need-based financial aid and our commitment to making Whitman affordable very seriously. It is why, though I mentioned merit scholarship, and you will definitely be automatically considered for that, we're only awarding merit aid to about 50% of our admitted students. Need-based financial aid is really where we're putting most of our funding. 80% of our funding goes to need-based scholarships. And in terms of, I guess, output, less than 1% of students default on their student loans, and only about 40% of our students actually graduate with debt at all. Of those students, the debt package is the second lowest on the West Coast, including public universities. So don't look at our sticker price. I would say this for many and most CTCL colleges that change lives schools, but don't look at our sticker price and let that scare you away if it seems like the kind of place that you're going to be happy. If we want to admit you, that can look like so many different kinds of students, right? There's not a direct metric for academic success or community success on Whitman's campus, right? If we want you to be on campus, it's really important that we make it work for you financially, right, above all else. We also have some talent-based scholarships that are live now. Those are in theater and dance, art, music, and debate. So do keep track of those. Links to those forms will be available once you've applied to Whitman. Finally, I want to talk about two things, one of which is not currently super unique at Whitman, and then one of them that definitely is. So first off is our test optional policy. We do not require the SAT or the ACT. It's actually been like that for 4 years on Whitman's campus, so this is not a reactionary policy. We understand that this year it's especially challenging sometimes just logistically to take the SAT or ACT. However, we're under the impression that it doesn't always make students feel like they have the most amount of control going into that testing process, going into the application process. We want you to feel like you're putting your best foot forward. And we've ultimately determined that, on campus or testing is not directly correlated to any amount of success, or perhaps more importantly, a lack of success on Whitman's campus. So many different types of students will do well here, will thrive, and they're not all amazing test takers. The other piece that I wanted to mention is our early financial aid guarantee. So though many CTCL colleges are test optional, the early financial aid guarantee is something that amongst really all colleges is pretty unique to Whitman. This is on, you can find it on our website. It is essentially like a preliminary financial aid application where you'd submit your FAFSA and your CSS profile to Whitman along with your transcript from high school. And we will get back to you with a financial aid package that if you were to be admitted, you would receive from us. It is a guarantee in that sense. So it's not an offer of admission, right? That's important. You could see what your hypothetical financial aid package would look like and then not gain admission to Whitman. However, if you are looking at schools of a similar size with similar tuition costs, similar endowments, getting this early bid financially from Whitman can be a great way to just think about private colleges in general. That thing I said earlier about our sticker price, if you want to see what a financial aid package would actually do to make that affordable, to cut down on the sticker price, I think the early financial aid guarantee is just a great tool for the college search in general. So you can find that on our website, and I want to end with that because we're really excited about it, especially with how things, I've referred to COVID maybe indirectly like 20 times, but with the way that things are right now, we know that it's difficult to conceive this big 4-year education and all these costs. So the financial aid guarantee is ultimately designed to make that feel more approachable to you and your family. And finally, I'm going to hand things back to Henry. We do want a chance to answer all your questions. We've hopefully left you enough time to do that, to ask those. Yeah, so we look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thanks so much for that great information, Louise. So thankfully, we do have a couple questions in the chat already, and I'm going to start with Aurora's because it does tie nicely into our discussion about applications. Aurora asked, is there an application price? I believe the common application fee is about $60, but important to note for Whitman specifically, if you send us an application through the Common App by December 1st, and that's regardless of round, whether you choose early decision or regular decision, if you get that into us by December 1st, we will guarantee to have that application fee waived. Now, there's certainly some students every year who might send us an application after that deadline and apply for a fee waiver, and we are able to sometimes grant those on a case-by-case basis, but applying by December 1st is your best way to guarantee that fee waiver. We also want to get to Emma's question as well. Emma had an awesome question about potential neuroscience majors or courses and how that relates to maybe an interdisciplinary major. So actually, before I hand it off to Luke and maybe give him a chance to chat about students he knows who have created their own individually planned major, I will say that you're correct that there's no single neuroscience degree that you'd be graduating from Whitman with. That said, there are plenty of electives you could take either in the bio department, maybe chem or psychology, that will have neuroscience material covered in those elective courses. So you could certainly build up that academic portfolio as you think about grad school or professional opportunity, even potentially going into the pre-health science advising track while taking some neuroscience courses. But then we certainly do encourage students to think about individually planning their own if they don't find a major or a combined program that cleanly fits what they're looking for. So I'll actually turn it to Luke and see, Luke, have you had any friends who have created their own, and what does that look like for them?
Yeah, definitely. I would say it's relatively easy to do. It just means sort of being on it. You have to do some extra work when you first get to school naturally because it's outside of the box, but definitely possible. And I think, as you say, Henry, there are certainly rigid programs, but I would say each professor could address almost any specific interest that you have. So in terms of neuroscience, I don't know offhand, but I'm sure that there are either bio or psychology professors who that's their thing. And that would mean maybe taking some of their classes that aren't specifically neuroscience, but then building that relationship with them. And they're going to be psyched that that's what you're interested in. And then that would mean going to their office for office hours, sort of figuring out more about it through that route. And then in terms of designing a major, definitely possible too. Again, you're not going to necessarily take specifically a neuroscience class. I mean, I think that does come up occasionally, but it couldn't be all of your interest and focus. But whatever major you design, your faculty will work with you to select the best courses that address that. So I spoke with someone recently who's doing user experience, which is very much not a necessarily liberal arts idea, but really cool that she was doing that because it's combining psychology and maybe a little bit of economics. And so I think really whatever your interest is, there's a way to channel that and address that.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. Louise, do you want to jump in?
Yes, sorry. For neuroscience specifically, we do have some upper level classes through our biology and BBMB departments. That's biochemistry, biophysics, and molecular biology. And I know of two ongoing research projects on campus or faculty research on campus. One is a biology and psychology kind of joint project on concussions. And then there's also some epilepsy research as well in one of our live animal labs. So that's been really cool to learn a little bit about through students. But there is, I think Professor Jewers is like kind of the corresponding neuroscience faculty member within the BBMB department. And there are many kind of neuropsych leaning professors and experiments there. So you'd certainly be able to supplement like the major that you created with some hands-on experience specific to that area.
We're lucky to be at a school where, as an undergraduate institution, professors are really here to teach, but then also have great research projects during the summer. And so you'll see a lot of those students think about using the internship grant perhaps to conduct some of that research collaboratively with professors, and then maybe use that as the foundation for their theses in that senior spring. We have a question from Arden. How do you handle narrative transcripts? Is there anything special I need to be aware of? So I can definitely tackle this, and I'll let Louise jump in, certainly if she's had any experience with narrative transcripts as well. We're going to evaluate those on an individual basis, and that's the beauty of Louise and myself and our colleagues all having separate regions of recruitment and application reading that we know. For example, I know of a couple of schools in my areas where we get narrative transcripts. And so instead of mainly focusing on perhaps not only the grades themselves, but also the high-level AP IB courses you've taken, we're specifically reading into not just your overall performance as the teacher or professor describes it, but also your academic growth and your growth as a student overall. We want to see evidence from those narrative transcripts that you've, especially in the courses you may have struggled with early on, that you've shown an ability to adjust your work ethic and routine in order to have more success in the group. And I often know that these narrative transcripts are at schools where project-based collaborative work with your students is also a big emphasis. So we want to see evidence in those narrative evaluations from your teachers that you can work really well in teams, particularly at a school like Whitman that thrives on that interpersonal dynamic, both in the classroom and outside. So those are just some of the things I look for. Louise, what do you think you might look for in a narrative evaluation?
Henry, I think that you summarized it really nicely. I would say that, yeah, it is our job to do that research, to reach out to your high school if there's something that we don't understand about it. So don't worry too much, right? When you're applying to colleges, right? That high school was the right fit for you. It's our job to fill in, to fill in any gaps that we might perceive, but most likely we'd be aware going into the process based on our territory that's the deal. We have several students from a couple of really cool high schools with narrative transcripts who have thrived on Whitman's campus. There's One Stone in the Boise area. So I would just say, I would definitely encourage you to apply, as I hope you're already thinking about, and not to worry about that element of your academic profile.
Awesome. So we do have another question. Actually, it looks like a couple questions. So we're going to get to Anna's, and we're going to tackle piece by piece. Anna's wondering, are foreign applicants eligible to apply for theater scholarships? And I will turn it back to Louise because Louise has worked specifically with these scholarships before.
Yes, you are eligible for theater scholarships. However, the theater scholarship and any scholarship, talent-based scholarship labeled President's Scholarship, basically what they'll do is meet your financial need in gift money. So erase the potential loan package or federal loan package that some students qualify for. For international students, we will meet your need in gift money regardless of whether you get this scholarship or not. So if you're an international student who's going to be seeking need-based financial aid, and if you suspect that will make up the majority of your financial aid package, you can still apply. You're certainly eligible to apply. Maybe that's the quicker, cleaner answer. However, it might not actually make a difference in your scholarship package size or anything like that. Our international financial aid is already pretty generous, and it wouldn't lead to any supplemental funding. If you don't think that you'll qualify for need-based financial aid, I would definitely recommend applying for that, and you'll also be considered for merit as an international student.
Anna, you also had a great question about whether the people looking at my theater scholarship application would have access to my Common App and who those evaluators might be. So really, once you submit the Common App and then proceed to submit any supplemental work for that theater scholarship or the debate or the fine arts scholarship, the faculty in those departments are actually the primary ones evaluating you for the scholarship. So they wouldn't necessarily be looking at your common application. They're actually focusing exclusively on any of that supplemental work that you'll submit. So certainly if you want any portfolio work or any other supplements to be seen by our admission committee, that's something you definitely want to put in the Common App. But then for that specific talent-based scholarship, those are things you should upload there because those faculty members wouldn't see your Common App material, making sure those faculty have a chance to see all the work that you've done and would like to be considered.
Yes, definitely, Henry. No, the faculty will not have access to your transcript, that piece of your application. You'll be able to clearly keep those separated when you're applying. We won't share your Common App with others on campus until you enroll. We'll keep that confidential.
We have a question from Emma. Could you speak a bit about the study abroad opportunities? Are they led by Whitman faculty? Thanks. So we will I'll give you a couple broad overview pieces before I actually turn it over to Luke, because he just got back from studying abroad last year. There are two key universal things about our study abroad offerings, which are great for students. First, there's actually been a very intentional decision by Whitman to not have any Whitman colleges overseas. All of our study abroad approved programs are either through another individual college or university or a separate Study Abroad Institute program. And that's intentional because Whitman really believes in you leaving the Whitman campus and bubble of pedagogy and getting a different academic perspective in your separate group or university, and then challenging your own peers at Whitman with that new academic method and understanding to make sure we're all growing and evolving in the classroom together. The other great piece about all of the study abroad offerings here is that actually, if you find a program that's more expensive than what you'd be paying in a Whitman semester, based on your financial aid package, our financial aid team will actually increase the need that they're giving you as part of your award to make sure that you're not paying any more than what you'd be paying for that Whitman semester. So through that matching process, Whitman really works to make that study abroad area of our campus more accessible. And so I'll actually let Luke then speak to what his study abroad experience was like.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. Yeah, this past spring I was studying abroad in France before fleeing due to COVID. But I had 2 months there, which was lovely. And for my program, it was a homestay, which is fairly common, but that's one of many ways to do it. I had friends who lived in larger dormitory style housing. I had friends who had sort of traveling field studies. Those are more of the science bio-based ones. But yeah, so as Henry said, there are many partner institutions. And I think in a lot of ways that opens up more opportunities because you can have that homestay like I had, or you can have that dormitory in a huge European city, or you can have that traveling, very rural research semester, which I think is excellent. And I just want to add on to that too, is that I guess the one way you could travel abroad with a Whitman professor would be through just a super short summer study abroad called Crossroads, which is also offered. And in that case, usually there's 2 or 3 per summer, and there's, I think, 10 or 15 Whitman students that travel with a couple Whitman faculty and meet people in the field. That's not just a Whitman bubble necessarily, but that's sort of a lower commitment way to study abroad as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Luke. Louise, I'm going to actually ask you first in your own student experience and now as a staff overseeing a lot of the events on campus, what would you say some of the most popular clubs or events on campus are?
One that I think is really cool, and I remember from my student experience, and if one of our interns is actually co-president of it right now, is the Borders as Method Club. It focuses on immigration, globalization, and global movement in general. And they have a lot of events throughout the year, but one kind of like flagship event that they have is Immigration Week, and they'll bring like activists and speakers to campus, lead workshops, focus on the Walla Walla Immigrant Rights Coalition, which is a community organization that the campus pairs with. That is really cool, and again, really site specific, right? Drawing from the immigrant and migrant worker community in Walla Walla to focus on larger global issues of movement and socioeconomic movement and striation throughout the world. Something that is similar to that, or yes, kind of similar in its like underlying like value is our Power and Privilege Symposium. There were a couple of pictures from that earlier in the presentation, but this is also kind of year-long, run by students. It was originally pitched by students, but the symposium itself is like a one-day event where classes are canceled, and instead we have a series of workshops, panels, presentations, where students are working together, and sometimes with staff and faculty members, but really students are the driving forces to tackle issues of equity and inclusion in the world at large, but also on our campus. They talk about financial aid, the experience of students of color on campus, and it's meant to be kind of a listening and learning space that's outside of a traditional classroom. So I think that that's really cool. And as I mentioned, it's focused on one day, but there are actually weekly power and privilege topics in our intercultural center and other initiatives. There's like visiting speakers through that funding as well. So that's another really cool program I draw students' attention to.
Thanks, Louise. Luke, with our last minute or so, do you want to maybe chime in with any of your favorite clubs or events you've been a part of?
Yeah, I think a neat community building group would be intramural sports. A lot of students participate, even if they had no experience with sports in high school. It's just a fun way to see people throughout the day and sort of compete with them for a championship. That's a fun way to do it. For anybody who's sort of business or finance oriented, there's a really neat program called WIC, Whitman Investment Company, where a group of students actually gets a chunk of Whitman's endowment and gets to decide every week what they want to invest that in, which is sort of high stakes, and it's cool that they're offered that that ability to do that, and it's an excellent way to learn about all the finance jargon and things like that. So those are two, I think, neat examples of clubs. Those are two that I personally enjoy.
Thanks so much, Luke. So with that, I know our time is about to run out. So I really want to thank you all for being so engaged and offering such great questions to our team. We've listed these email addresses and contact information on the screen so that you can always reach out to us, whether we're your regional officer or not. I know Luke is always happy to chime in with his student experience and give you that on the ground anecdote because it's so hard to get in these virtual days. So please don't hesitate to follow up with us after the session and ask away because we are here to share things about the Whitman experience with you.
Thank you so much for presenting, and thank you everyone for joining us. When you go to close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey, and we'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. Also, this was just one of many sessions being hosted, so be sure to sign up for additional sessions. And in about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording as well as all of the other sessions recordings available on the same website where you registered. So thank you, everyone. Bye.